So I think that if you look today in some of the societies today, I think now remember I'm not an expert in this. I was just trying to solve a problem in construction law. But if you look at the so I'm only bringing that that little bit of opinion, if you like. It's just part of the story anyway. But if you look at law and stuff like that, you could probably put it into two types: distributive and commutative. And to understand these, because you need to go back to Plato and Aristotle, because that's essentially that provides another way of looking at things. If you're thinking of a distributive system, you're thinking basically in terms of sort of a nodal point there which distributes food, distributes laws, distributes all the stuff. Where if you think of commutative system, you're talking pockets, far smaller pockets, like maybe little city-states or something like that, or villages or towns or stuff like that, which act in a sort of a commutative bit. So they've got their own set of conventions, if you like, customs and conventions, which you might call common law. Just set up behaviours, and it sort of self-regulates, because if somebody gets out of hand, well then the customs and conventions within that community, or will actually bring it down a little bit. Aristotle's going to improve that, along with, and if you bring in people like Thomas Aquinas and things like that, and his teachings, and which he takes from the other teacher, the guy Jesus of Nazareth. So he's going to wrap these in, and they'll wrap this in, and they'll create a contract. They'll create what's as close as let's say, to a doctrine, if you like, of contract law, which is going to get split in about 1666, And again, the law, when you think it's England and Wales law, when you think it goes back into common law system way back, no, there was a severance around about the late 1800s, I think, where they said that that law is going to be, and contract and whatever are going to be based on the idea, or the idea of consent. Consent is between person and person, son, whatever. It doesn't matter. Like it's a human being and a being, Yeah. Right. So going back to the Republic, which is what the book is Plato's cause. No, it's not really a republic. Yeah. Its original title was in the Greek. It was called Constitution. Remember the Republic. There was already a republic in Rome, which we all know about. But yeah, when you put Plato's thing on and then you superimpose one on the other, you think you got this magic formula, the republic, which is the title of his book is really Constitution. You agree, from what I understand. So it's dialectic, one person says this and one person says that, look, what is this? And one of the situations they get themselves into is that, they're all sitting around. And these would all be sort of citizens, or not citizens, but be prominent people, not slaves. Yeah, these are the guys that are going to sort of set the rules for a polity such a small city, which is going to be called a city-state, which sort of gives us sort of a template structure for the later Florences and Genoa and Venice and what have you. But this city-state, so the question, when they're sitting around and having their chats and what have you, they ask the question, like, what is courage, what is beauty, what is justice and things like that, notwithstanding that, there is already a world out there where people have particular behaviours, but what they're doing is they're extracting, or they might call it abstract, but it's extracting from them, taking what is justice, and then they're able to define justice. Now, to bring the word define into the whole, and remember, if you remember the Kuhnian paradigm, you don't have a definition. You have no book of definitions at this moment. That only kicked in the late 1800s. I think in England it's Oxford University kicked that off, I think. I think there's a movie about it with Mel Gibson in it. There's a movie, I can't remember. That's where they start putting the dictionary. Particularly, you're going to need that if you're going to need a common language. Particularly a common English language, yeah? Notwithstanding, I think if rumours that I'm getting through, let's say on shorts, if rumours be France and Germany are going to take that language from another country and they're going to totally corrupt it, bastardize it and whatever you do, and give this across to the new world as the English language, without any understanding. It's not just like Francis is going to love this because it's just going to take English and to understand English, or to understand for anybody who's learning English, let's say in Asia or something like that, or the one to sort of understand how Europeans, you really got to look at the language, you know, because it's based on sort of this dualist type of, which was originally body and soul. It was changed into the mind and body now, so there's no soul because, you know, your man said sayonara, you know, Napoleon said sayonara, and everything's based on thought now rather than being and whatever way you want to connect with you, whether you think creator or universe or word or whatever, yeah? So, so yeah, so they're sitting around, what is justice, what is it? Now, we assume that like, justice is sort of, what they're trying to do here, they're trying to create a generalization. Rather than I probably said before, so you can see a dog, I can see a just man, I can see a just man, I can see how they interact. I'm going to pull out something in my head, and I'm going to create this idea, justice. So it's an idea about ideas. Yeah, like justice and beauty, and we can sit down there and take something and define it. Take something coarse, yeah, chop it all up and just and define it. What is it, you know, and put words and, you know, subject predicates into what this whole idea of beauty is, or justice is, or what courage is, yeah. So you create these ideas, yeah, that aren't really, you know, they're just ideas. But they're, if I'm speaking to another person, you know, I can say he is. You know, he has certain behaviours, certain ways he conducts himself, certain characteristics he has, in which there is sort of, he is a just man, you know, to say, yeah, but to take it out, to extract it, yeah, and to say what it is, and then sort of redistribute it later on, you know, about 1,000 years later, or 2,000, yeah, it's about 2,000 years later on, you start applying it, yeah. Apart from the fact that, let's say, the workaround for that, the false workaround, I think, you know, for something like that is, oh, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and that doesn't work for me. But I'm still thinking about an idea, which, you know, 7 billion people around the world have an idea in their head. I have this idea in my head what beauty is, and then I'm going to project it, and I'm going to try and engage, yeah, with the world outside. I don't see it as that. I see it as a like trust. It's not even a relationship. It's not. I mean, to call it a relationship, it's just something that we might want to put words on it, you know. But it's like love or trust or something like that, and just, you know, how it flows from person to person, you know, and a being from one being to another, irrespective of age, culture or colour or whatever. That's nothing to do with that, you know. It's what to do with how a human being engages with another. It's not how we engage. I mean, even the words I'm using are all sort of 20th century bullshit, you know. It's not an engagement. It's a you could say relationship, but it's a there's a reciprocity coming in here, you know, like oh, I love you, she's not the same thing back or whatever like that. So, you know, he is angry, he is this, he is that. So I'm making existential claims here, you know, like John is angry. That's an existential claim, and I don't have the right to say that. I can say John appears angry, but I can't say he is angry, because is angry goes to his ontology, whereas I'm just here, it's just mere appearance. So you've got these ideas, yeah. Now that's all, you know, you can have these ideas, and that's where you get your ideas from, yeah. And they don't, like, it's not like justice. I can hold it in my hand, I can see it and stuff like that. Or beauty, I can't see beauty in my hand, you know. And beauty is not an idea. Yeah, it's not a boxed up platonic idea that only exists in the eye of the beholder, not me, yeah. It's a relationship, and it's a relationship just to everything. I mean, just to your world. It's a relationship to your world. How you describe your world. If you describe it in terms of beauty, well, then it's a different thing. If you describe it in terms of decay, it's a different thing. I see some decay, actually, you know what? And it's not. It's entire different type of thing going on. Yeah, but you come along, and then you've got Aristotle, and Aristotle comes with this, and his thing doesn't really become available into Western Europe until around about 1200, yeah, and because I think, and that was early, because when the Ottomans came in and started pushing, and then you'd all the scholarship from Persia, Arabic, Muslim, and Greek. You know, the Greek schools and the scholarship now. You know, they just pushed into Europe because they were trying to escape, blah blah blah, whatever. Yeah? And that's the story for that. You know, it's I think they pretty know this is academic. But Nico Marchian, I think I've got the word correct. I don't want the pronunciation. Nico was the son. Nico was Aristotle's son, from what I understand. And Nicomachean ethics is really to do with virtue ethics. And virtue ethics, I don't know, it's wrapped around Thomas Aquinas, the teachings of Thomas Aquinas, who were carrying on their monastic, their own spiritual roles, you know, on a community basis. Yeah, so it wasn't all distributed. Like, I mean, you would have visits from the Platonic structure, let's say from like the cardinals or the bishops or whatever like that, on the word of the Pope and whatever like that. Yeah, but essentially these guys existed on their own, and there were reasons for their existing. There were Franciscans, Augustinians, there was Dominicans, there was the Jesuits. The Jesuits were brought in for the Reformation. That's what they were sort of soldiers to, you know, sorry, not to counter the Reformation. You know, Loyola. The guy, the Basque guy, I think he started it off, and that's where you get the René Descartes. René Descartes with all these conceptions, the world as conceptions, and here we are with all these conceptions. A bit like CDOs. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Big Short. You know, the CDOs and what have you, collateral debt obligations, and then you got the synthetic debt. But it's all basically gambling. You know what I mean? It's just games of chance and what have you, using concepts about money, which doesn't exist because that's a concept since 1973. Yeah, but it's an idea, you know, based on exchange rates and whatever. There's no time, there's no correspondence directly into what you were talking. It's an extension, let's say, of the idea of justice, that you can pull something out of the world and something in. States, non-natural legal persons, and zero, which underpins, you know, that's part of it. For me, that's part of a different cult. Yeah. It's a different. If you believe that, we've got the ones and the zeros in the technique and the technology, because that's where we are. It's all technology. Most of it's technology, which is pouring back into us, and that will become our ontology, all premised on zero. But you want to go that way, that's fair. But everybody's got a choice. You know, like when you become zero, whatever like that, when other people become zero, you know, it's an entirely different thing. But you had Nicomachean ethics, which translates into virtue ethics, which wraps in with the good bits, and also wraps in with what you might call the bandage. You know, the cardinal virtues within the Roman Catholicism. I think I'm not too sure. And then you had the 7 deadly sins, which was, you know, greed, anger, pride, all those. But they were excesses. You know, there was a human condition. What those 7 deadly sins, if you like, they were described excesses, I think, and that's my understanding. You know, because Aristotle had the same thing, that you could have courage, but you just had to guess what is recklessness and what is courage. You know, and he might have used this golden ratio, like 5. You know, this is like the relationship of a part to the whole. You know, and depending on where we talk in terms of lines, yeah, because we all these lines going all over the shop, you know. But anyway, so you'd have either a distributive system, let's say, based on ideals, which don't exist, or you'd have a commutative system, which is really to do with, if you were taking the original justice, or the original goodness, or the original virtues within the human being, yeah, and you sort of grow those. But our schools don't do that. They don't grow that. That type of approach to becoming a human being. And so if I ask a child today, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? They say, I want to be a fireman or a soldier or something like that. Well, that's what you do. It's not what you are. Yes, that's what you do. It's not what you are. If you say I am a fireman, or I am a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, or those are just names. Yeah, for some purpose that is all right. Some fire that's in here that. I distinguish the grey matter, the mind with the synapses and what have you like that with the chemical interactions. I just put that in the body part. The other thing, the will part. My will is a different thing. That's under threat now. Hugely in Europe. Hugely, because to give your will to something that doesn't exist. I mean, it's not like justice or beauty or or courage or something like that that you can see in the world today. These are stranger things. There's no, these are cuts in the, somebody's brought these things in, and that you can create a state where all these human beings are going to give themselves to the state so that they can distribute on a platonic basis back to us, including food, and how we behave. But in Aristotle's time, when you build up the individual, the individual, like I said, is able to make promises, and the individual is to be able to make oaths, and the individual is to be able, the ability to make a vow, to make a vow to somebody else, like, such as in a marriage. When you do your vows, you might think they're all just on them, but back in a different paradigm, back before anything really kicked off, and you had this, like a human being, one person to another person, and you are making a vow. It's an entirely different arrangement. If you want to just have a contract, just sign a contract marriage, that's fine. But the minute you start bringing vows into it, you're talking existential here. You're talking about that person with its own purpose and its own mind and its own, body, whatever it's done, is making a vow or an oath. Hence, if somebody makes a promise is an obligation one makes to oneself. But you can't make those promises now. We're not in Gladiator, Decimus Aurelius, or whatever his name was, Maximus Decimus. So when he's in the movie and he says, I give my word, his word is good enough. You don't need a piece of paper. There's no paper involved. It's just that human being has said X, and that's what it's going to be, unless he's killed or something, unless there's some overreaching impediment thing. But in our things now, we've got our impediments, and we've got huge impediments to actually engaging on a commutative basis, because the laws that are telling us how to behave, what language we use to the schools, that's been going on for 100 years, But and then so we got all these concepts and what have you. But my view is, in order to make a better distinction, I don't know if anybody remembers the. You probably know. I just saw it. It's a painting called The School of Athens. Well, that's what it's called. I don't know if Raphael called it The School of Athens, because if he did, well, it's a bit of a misnomer, because they're not all from Athens. They're from Syracuse. They're from Asia Minor, which is now, it went Turkey. No, it went to Anatolia. Then it went to Turkey, and now I think it's Turkey now. It's because the Seljuk Turks or the Ottoman Turks came in. Either displaced or just covered over the people. The original people, I think, that were there are probably there or something like that. So, the School of Athens, and in the School of Athens, you've got the two boys up at the top. You've got Plato and Aristotle, and Aristotle is pointing to the ground. That's where you get your knowledge. Plato is pointing to up. In other words, he gets them from ideals. But then he's not, in my view, he's not fully informed. Because when you say up, you're really talking about the heavens. Because it used to be the sun and the moon and other bits and pieces that told you what was actually happening. The aspects and what have you. It's an entirely different thing when you bring zero into the equation, or when you bring into the ontological. I would imagine that a lot of, I'm just saying this, but I don't know, it's very impressionistic, but I would imagine a lot of engineers believe that when they die, that's it. Particularly engineers of today. But on an ontological basis, because you had ontology, you had epistemology, and you had technique. And what we've got now, we're in a world of technique, massively technique, and you're beginning to argue over ontologies now. Even in America, I believe that they're arguing. I don't know, here's this weird stuff coming out of America, they think that greed is going to be a good thing, is going to be permissible by Jesus now, so the Christians can actually say, well, greed's okay now, it's just rewriting. But that's like Mark Carney as well. Mark Carney says, we are all one nation, and you're not, because nation means common origin. Yeah, that's what it means. It's just what nation. That's what it means. But if you want to sort of come in and take this thing that's in existence and redefine what it is, like Plato and all these Platonic things, you can do that. But the thing is, unless it's no bearing on what's actually happening in the world, and what's happening in the world is a lot of dissonance. A lot of people are just don't quite understand what. You can tell that from the amount of stuff that's coming through. And in order to understand that, you've got to go back to those two guys. You know, they can ditch Platonism. You really do. Particularly because it's premised on the laws of the universe. Like, I'm not saying that, you know, God's enough. I'm not talking about that. But I'm just saying that if somebody wants to find a God, or find the base of their existence, or ask the questions, or, you know, and probably this is the problem, ask the questions why. Science doesn't answer that, because science took out final cause, final destination, if you like, took it out of Aristotle's four causes. Aristotle had four causes. He had a material cause, which he thinks the world is all made up of material. He had a formal cause, to just shape. So if you look at a mountain and stuff, that's the same stuff as on the ground. It's just the shape gives it the name mountain, yeah? In the same way as that human being, well, it's just form, material, yeah? And then there's the efficient cause, which is all the bits that are running around doing, you know, it's just engaging in the world, of what the world is doing, what have you, like that. But the final cause, and the weird thing about it is that in the French Constitution, they all base on reason. But when in Ireland, when they were doing it, there was a preamble to it, which actually says what the Irish people was. Yeah. So the state, the choice of the state, was a choice. Yeah. It wasn't like we are the state now. It wasn't an extension of this, an ideal extension. So we're going to choose the state, and they had the Roman Catholic thing on one side to look after the little ghost and whatever, yeah, the ghost, which, you know, and then you the other bit, the parish one, and it was sort of into open. But that's split now, that's cut, because if you're going to go with Europe, there is no God, and you might think there is. You might think of all these Christians, Shinto, Taoists, Buddhists, Islam, you know, anybody that believes have the belief with our existence, yeah, forget it. You've got this whole overreaching thing that says, no, we want your will in order to exist. And that's premised on reason being the way to go. And that reason, that assumption of reason going, is based on mathematics that is going to be able to explain everything. This objective world that Francis Bacon and all them, Locke and what have you, sort of creating, you know, outside of the human being, outside of the human field. So if you think it's all going to be nice for your generation if we come to next and next and next, the whole idea of Europe is based on nothing but just thought, and that thought can change. It's happening even today. I think Trump and the word jurisdiction is getting a complete makeover, yeah? In the same way as nation in Canada is getting a complete makeover, because that's, no matter if you're indigenous to the area like this, the white man is saying that we're all one. Yeah, that word then becomes the way it is. But then again, you know, like most of these most of these legal persons, or these things, these strange things that you just invent with the law, yeah, they're just taking the names out from what had already been evolved. So you get names like Amazon and Anthropic and stuff like that. Then have actually got roots going back into ancestors. But you got the atomic lines, you know, the baby boomers, all that crack there to stop you actually going back that far. And what you got now is what you think you got. And it's all premised on zero. And you want to go down to zero route, feel free, but it's still a choice. I suggest, I think it's no wise choice.